welcome to Get Your Shit Together, episode etc., where if we don't explain it correctly the first time, you just throw it away, drink more, and try again. It's a beautiful thing filled with sadness and wonder. Let's go ahead and get started. So a friend of mine on Facebook said, how does music work? Music, how does it work? How? Or explain it to me like you would to a baby with brain damage. And so, as we're going to try and do by incurring some own brain damage unto ourselves. I'm going to try and talk about this in layers, much like a delicious cake. We have at the bottom percussion, in the middle harmony, and at the very top that sweet, sweet melody. So, bottom layer, percussion. Percussion does two things for you, and they're very important. They set the tempo, that's how fast or how slow you're going, and number two, they tell you what beats are emphasized. You'll notice that if you listen to reggae, different beats are emphasized compared to punk rock. Reggae would be like the bana, 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 kind of like that. It's more on the 2s and 4s, I guess. Whereas punk rock would just be like emphasize all the 8th notes. Yeah, that's punk rock, all the songs. Still fun though. But what that's coming from is where the percussionist is landing his bass hits, which are really telling you this is the motherfucking one beat, deal with it. That's what I think about when I hear the bass drum. And then you have your kick, which is, or I'm sorry, the kick is what I was just referring to. Kick / bass, interchangeable words. You also have your snare or clap. They're performing the same thing, just depending on what you're doing, what sound palette you're using. But yeah, clap. So that right there, you'll notice that there were kind of repeats. If you listen, I was doing, and that is a single repeat unit right there. And what you call that is a measure. So if you look at your percussion and you find small units where it's repeating over and over, typically the smallest unit you can get where it repeats you'd call a measure. So you can't always know that for sure because there's always funky time signatures, but for most stuff you're listening to, if you just listen to the percussion and see where it repeats on the smallest scale, that's going to be what's called a measure. Once you can find your measure and you can figure out how many beats are in that, so finding the beat is just a matter of making a mental note of whenever something loud is happening. That's how I do it anyway. So once you figure out your measure and you can count how many beats are inside of it, then you know how many beats are in measure, which lets you predict things. Now the cool thing is, people aren't that creative, it turns out. Turns out the same damn patterns have been used since for motherfucking ever. Because they work, they're great. The human brain is like, oh man, you just made a pattern and you break that pattern? Oh, so good. Gah. So, one of the patterns that you'll see all the time is 3 the same, 1 different. And that's in fact the pattern I just did, where I did 3 measures exactly the same and the next one's different. Now that same concept can be expanded. Maybe it's not just 1 measure, maybe it's, let's talk about, instead of a measure, we're going to bump it up 1 level. We were just talking about drums a second ago, percussion, we're going to go up to the harmony, the bass. Say the bass has a phrase and it's doing, a phrase is just a musical term for a single line where it's kind of uninterrupted until you get to the end, and then it stops. And when it stops, it's actually going to stop on a note called the cadence. In other words, it's usually a note that's in key, and it's usually the first note of your key. And by that I mean if you were to do a scale, like a G scale, the first note is a G. A cadence in the key of G would typically be on G. That's just a thing that happens. So, and when you finally land on that note, your brain goes, oh, there we go, I finally landed back home. And because of that feeling you get in your brain, composers use that all the time as a place to stop. And they usually stop that at the end of a musical phrase. Why that's important. So we're listening and we're doing that three's the same, one's different for on percussion. Now on top of these four, we can have a bass line that just rides on top of that and does just one phrase this long. So the fingers, how do you work? We have our four rhythm things, percussion measures. On top of that, we have a bass line, and the bass line stretches this far. Now what you'll find will happen a lot, I'm going to make my pinky look funny because my pinky is a little different one on the drums. But you can do this the same, then do another one the same, and then do another one the same. And then the fourth one you do different in the bass line. And by doing that, the bass line is what's going to dictate the melody that's sitting on top of it. And so by doing something different than the bass line, you drive the melody to finish right there and try and cadence at the same time. And all of a sudden, by putting these different components, you have your percussion, your harmony, which has a phrase and it repeated a couple times, and then it finally decided to do something different and land on something. And then you have your melody on top of that, which is doing a similar thing. You finally can get a musical thought, a coherent thing where it's like, we're doing something, we're doing something, we're doing something, oh shit, it changed, get me back home, get me back home, get me back home, and you land. That's what music is. Skrillex abuses the shit out of this via drops, like pretty much every dubstep guy does. But if you go back and listen to classic swing or even jazz or rock, blues, any of those, you'll hear there's just structures where they just build on top of each other. So your homework, if you want to get your shit together, go to Pandora, type in 3 different music genres, do like a reggae, do a punk rock, and do like fucking pop music, like Lady Gaga or something. And all I want you to do is listen to the beats and try and predict when something new is going to happen. If you'll find while you're doing this, like, I want you to be sitting there like a dork going, derp, 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 I think it's going to happen here. And sometimes when you point, nothing happens and you feel like an idiot, that's fine. Just keep doing it until you get it. But by listening over and over and being able to predict that, what you're actually identifying is musical phrases. And that's kind of step one. Once you start identifying musical phrases and getting good at it, you can actually start doing stuff like writing it down and figuring out the structure of the song. And you might find out, oh, it does this. I'm going to call that just for the hell. I don't have any letters, so shit. Give me some letters. A. This first thing I see is A. Oh, it's the same thing again, so I'm going to call it A. Oh, it does a B now. That's like something different. I haven't heard that before. And then it goes back into A. Holy shit, you're just structure mapping a song. Get your shit together. I don't know if that made sense, but let's hope so. Also, these are my work glasses. My regular glasses are waiting for me elsewhere. Deal with it. I'm handsome and well-liked by my peers. Get your shit together.